There you go.
Hello,
Hi.
how are you?
Good.
Okay.
So you're for flying the Confederate flag.
Yes.
Okay. So like you can prepare your back information so then I can get like what you're saying so then I can counter that.
Okay, one more time.
If you want to like state your evidence first, then I can like see what you're saying.
Okay.
Uh,
Um, Now when I say that you should have the right to fly the Confederate flag, I do not mean um like on state grounds kind of thing with
oh,
South
okay.
Carolina.
Okay, yeah, that
But
makes more sense.
yeah, not publicly, but privately. So um if I or someone else on my street wanted to fly a Confederate flag, then they should have that right because freedom of speech, it's symbolic speech. Um,
But would you consider that right in the privacy of their own home? So, like the way people fly the American flag on a doorstep, isn't that still public? You know, if it's offensive to someone across the street, you still shouldn't be allowed to fly it, especially with something that's so stained with. Um, it's why people don't put swastikas on their house, even if they do believe that, because it's something so stained with not only disrespect but the loss of lives that it's kind of a disrespect to those who did
mhm.
die because of it. And where we are as a country now, we can't really like allow that to happen because it's, in the privacy of your own home you can do whatever you want, but even outside your home, if it's going to be something that could affect others, it shouldn't be
Right.
allowed.
Um, See, I disagree with that because everything offends people. If you think about it,
That's true.
I mean, honestly, and to
Yeah.
start eliminating things that offend certain people is kind of silly.
Hmm.
Also,
Well, I agree with
thank
God.
you. It's very subjective with the swastika. It's not very subjective. It's like the hate groups, like the skinheads, the Aryan race, and then that are like Nazi sign is great. Whereas the Confederate flag, I don't know like the statistics, but some people think it's heritage. Some people do see it as a sign of racism.
But it's a heritage of what? Of what culture? Of what standing? Because if you're saying, okay, so if you're saying it's heritage, so if let's just say I was German and I'm like, well, my great great uncle was a Nazi. This swastika is my heritage. I know that maybe those people lost their lives, but it's my heritage. And even saying that like the Confederate flag doesn't stand for all that, it still does because when you had the Civil War, that was the symbol of the Confederacy was that Confederate flag. And it kind of took up, so even now I understand that like it may not have been meant to represent that, but if you know in a culture that that's what's currently being represented for people who are towards racism, then why would we allow something like that to be in our culture, especially in a time like now with so much racial tension?
Um, so let me, I guess, go in, I guess, whatever way you answered. Um, in South Africa, there's a lot of racial tension, and when the apartheid ended in 1991, Nelson Mandela, who became the first president elected in South Africa, they came up with a new flag. Just because there's a new flag doesn't mean there's not racial tension. So there's going to be racial tension anyway. If there are different races, there's going to be racial tension. Um, the Confederate flag that we see today is not the Confederate flag that was flown on top of state buildings. It was a different one. There are two
Mm-hmm.
Confederate flags that are very similar to that. There was the Army of Northern Virginia, which was kind of a square, and then there was one in Tennessee that is what it is now, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The one that was flown, there were three different Confederate flags that were flown on top of state buildings. The first one looks very similar to the Georgia one, except the only difference between the stars and bars and the Georgia state flag is that the Georgia state flag has an emblem in the royal stars
Mm-hmm.
when the Confederate flag didn't. After that, it was um, the last two were for a very short period of time, but it was the Confederate flag that we know it as today as a little square in the top left corner on a white field. On the third one, which was only for like less than a year, was very similar to the second one, just the third one had a red stain on it.
So it's gone through various forms.
Yes, but for the most of it, it was
okay.
The one very similar to the Georgia one.
Yeah, and I don't have enough knowledge on that to kind of say, like, I haven't gathered enough knowledge yet to say, like, whether that's, but I assume that's true. I don't think you would just throw out facts without them being actually
You can Google
true.
it.
I'm pretty sure that's true. But, and just for me, it's if you know that something is a symbol of hate, and even if that's not how it originally started, but I mean, if you look at, oh, I can't remember the name of the shooting. I was trying to remember that for the life of me right now. But
The Charleston
a
shooting?
church was shot.
The Emmanuel
Yeah,
9?
I can't remember the name of it. You probably just said it, but I can't really
Charleston
hear you.
shooting?
Thank you. And in that, he's seen holding a Confederate flag, and it's like the symbol of almost racism in culture today. So why would you allow that? I mean, if we had adopted another symbol, and I understand like heritage, but you also have to understand that if you fly that, the kind of difficult situation you're putting yourself in, because not only are you allowing other people to think that maybe you're racist, you're, when you say like that's my heritage, if someone told me like, Gabby, this shirt you're wearing, that shirt, just so you know, it a lot of people who are extremists, and that doesn't represent everyone in that group, but a lot of people who are racist wear that shirt, I'd probably take it off, just because I don't want to offend anyone, and especially when it comes to people whose lives have already been lost in such an extremely sad situation like slavery and all the things that happened there. I would just take it off because out of respect for the people who have lost their lives. And that's what I feel like, that's what if you don't want the day, then shouldn't you at least respect the people whose lives were already lost?
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, because your screen went black. I didn't know if it cut out or not. Dylan Roof, who was the kid or the child that shot up the church, there was also a picture of him burning the American flag. But the media didn't show that because the media is pro-left, because they understand that lots of people, the majority of people, whatever the statistics are, see the Confederate symbol as a racist symbol. They're going to show that to further dismantle the Confederate flag. You can Google Dylan Roof burning the American flag. It's basically the exact same thing. Also, there was a Supreme Court case, U.S. versus Johnson, in the early 90s, or maybe it was the late 80s. But it was that that Johnson had the right to burn the American flag because it was symbolic. So I guess what's the difference there? Should Johnson be allowed to?
How did they find in that? I'm just curious.
What?
What did they find in that? Did they find for or against in that Supreme Court?
Oh, for that Johnson.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, he's allowed to do that.
Okay, I was just curious.
I mean, you think about it, it is freedom of speech and symbolic. You don't have to agree with it. I personally disagree with burning the American flag because of the people that have lost their lives for that.
Yeah, I do too. And that's why I'm not against. Well, I mean, I am against the Confederate flag, but I also respect people's rights, and I kind of apply that to like every situation in my life. I mean, there's things that even if you feel like, okay, for instance, I'm vegetarian. I've been vegetarian for a month. If I don't go out and say like everyone shouldn't eat meat, because I respect everyone else around me to know that it's everyone's choice. Or if people want to fly the Confederate flag, you know what, that's your choice too. But I think that in a situation where it could affect other people, you should be respectful enough to say like, hey, my actions aren't just my actions. My actions can shadow onto other people, and that's kind of why I have such a big problem with it.
I understand that. I do. And but the difference is like, I mean,
but I guess there was already an established precedent on it then with the burning of the American flag. So really, it probably wouldn't happen for them to like try and make it illegal to fly a Confederate flag because that's kind of already a precedent in a Supreme Court case.
What Supreme Court case?
Weren't you saying that he wanted to fly he wanted to burn the American flag? You
No,
kind of cut out
that's what
there.
he did. He burned the
Yeah.
American flag, and then a few people took him to court. Virginia went to the
Mm-hmm.
Supreme Court, and the court was like, "Hey, this is legal, supreme."
Yeah. So then, wouldn't that establish a precedent anyway to say like, yeah, it's legal to fly a flag or burn it if you really want to?
I don't know about fly or burn. I don't know how specific it was.
Hmm.
I think it might have been just the American one, but I don't know. I'm very for personal rights, so.
Mm-hmm. Well, why do you see it as an invasion of rights?
Well, I mean, it is freedom of speech. I mean, is
Mm-hmm.
that the freedom? I know that's pretty basically the definition of it. If I had a flag, a white flag, and was like, you know, I don't know, I hate trees. I hate oak trees. And someone across the street was like, I love oak trees. I love pine trees. And the other person hates oak trees. Why should the person that says I hate oak trees take down their flag?
Hmm.
You know?
Well, in the same instance, this is going to sound really un-American for a second, but so if I were to fly like an ISIS flag and be like, you know what, I'm not flying it because I support ISIS. I'm flying it because I'm of this culture and I support, this culture itself. And it's not really a culture, I understand that, but I'm just saying like a general principle. Um, so would it, because I feel like a lot of people here are biased because we all are, well, I don't know if you're American, but like at least for myself, I know I'm American, so like protecting my rights is a really big thing. And I feel like a lot of people in America are so focused on their rights and like their rights being seized that they don't realize that sometimes it's not really about your rights being seized, it's about doing the thing that should be done. And if roles were reversed and there was a flag that was offending a bunch of people of a different nature, I feel like that would be so quick to be taken down. But when it comes to a Confederate flag, you can pull the, oh, what's my heritage card? And yeah, it's your heritage, but do you really want to show that part of your heritage? Because, you know, even if you say, like, well, it's not the flag that was used to support slavery, but if it's such a big symbol today, why even use it? Like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
You know, who are you trying to prove your heritage to? There's no, you know, it's if I learned that my family was Confederate and part of the Confederacy on that side, I wouldn't really want to show that off. And, maybe I would finally decide, like, hey, I guess I could, but I wouldn't want to fly that flag because I know how wrong that is. And even if their actions, or part of my family still believe that was the right way to be today, I would still feel like, it's just not right. And for the people who lost their lives, and I know lives were lost on both sides, but out of respect for that, why fly it when it could offend so many people?
That's like, I guess, offending people.
People are going at it in the comments.
Yeah. That's like saying if my next door neighbor was a terrorist and hated the American flag and that the American flag offended him, why should I take down my American flag if it offends somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Every flag is going to offend somebody. No matter what flag is,
Mm-hmm.
how it is. And, however you see the Confederate flag, it's kind of up to you. Because it is your right. Like, if someone
Mm-hmm.
wanted to fly a Nazi flag, they should. It's their right to. Freedom of speech, symbolic speech. Are they going to get hate for
Mm-hmm.
it? Yeah. But should their right be taken away? I don't think so.
But don't you kind of partially like have to see the kind of, I can't think of it, the kind of consequences that could come from that way of thinking? Because let's just say someone flies a Nazi flag, and then let's just say some total extremist comes and does something really violent to their household or to themselves, and then it sparks this going back and forth. So why even put the risk out there for this kind of consequence to happen when it would be just so easy to say, hey, I don't care if you fly that in your house, but to fly that out, in an area where other people are going to see it, I don't think that's right because of the actions that could have. If we've already seen at this time, people get so sparked up about things and all the violence that's happening, and people are so quick to just go to violence. Why would we allow for something like that to happen?
Well, I mean, it's gonna happen anyway. If you really think about it, someone's always going to be angry about something else. I mean, America is a country of 360 million people. Not everyone's going to agree. Also, that's why we have freedom of speech, because, I could disagree what that person says, but they have a right to say that because it's, their opinion, their view of it. And if someone does fly the Nazi flag, then, they should know that, they could be attacked or whatever. But, it's still, they could be like a very,
it's just hard in a situation like this because you want to protect people's freedom of speech, but you also don't want to infringe on the right of other people to go outside their house without being offended by a culture. And so, like, either way, someone's going to end up feeling like their rights have been infringed upon, because even, let's just say that person flies
what
it,
right
and you're
is
like,
the one that if they leave their house, they'll be hurt? I mean,
shouldn't it just be their right to their life and
but is that
their happiness?
So is the flag flying in someone's yard with colors and symbols making it so that they can't live, or no?
I mean, no.
So it doesn't really affect someone's right to life. I mean, because that's basically what a flag is. It's just colors and symbols.
If it's just colors and symbols, why don't you take it down?
Well, then why? That's like saying take the American flag down because it's just colors and symbols.
No, it's not.
What's the difference between the Confederate flag and the American flag?
Because the American flag isn't stained with a culture of oppression. Well, I mean, it is, but not as it didn't come from the basis of a flag.
Sorry.
The American flag didn't. There you go. The American flag didn't come from a basis of oppression. I mean, this flag, if you want to go back to its roots and where it started from a group that was for slavery. And I mean, it could take many different forms, and this wasn't the flag that was flown during that time, but it bridged from that. And you're typing really fast, so I feel like you're gonna look through. I thought I was gonna get roasted. But so if it's built on this oppression, then why are we gonna? If the American flag was built on something as dark and as built on bloodshed as that, I would be like, we need to change our American flag because it's not right. And
let me answer it so I don't get confused. Like the Confederate flag, the American flag has also gone through a metamorphosis. Each time we get a new state, we get a new star. Well, it's been that way since 1776, et cetera, et cetera. In a way, the American flag was built on oppression because before 1865 and the 14th Amendment, Black people could not vote, and there was slavery, all under the American flag. We also killed millions of Indians and forced them out of their homes. Andrew Jackson's Trail of Tears, he kicked all the Indians, the Cherokee Indians in Georgia, and put them in Oklahoma. You can't do that. That's oppressive. That's moving a culture from one Georgia to Oklahoma. Georgia and Oklahoma are completely different.
Trying to get them to assimilate.
I don't know if you've ever been to Oklahoma or Georgia, but
no,
they're very different. Culturally, geographically, linguistically, they're different. So the American flag was, if you look at it that way, built on oppression. The Confederate flag, if you also look at it that way, was not built on oppression because that's not it, I guess. I mean, yeah, the Confederacy fought for slavery, but it wasn't just slavery. It was numerous things.
Okay, but would you agree the main one was slavery? I mean, it was essentially fought into those who were for slavery and those who were against slavery. I mean, you had the North who were building a booming economy and they were struggling at first, but the entire premise was that the South was using slaves, and the North felt after, this time period that the slaves should be freed. And that's when, all that happened. So the main premise was slavery. I mean, you can say that about any war, though, really, tracing it back. I could say that the Holocaust, oh, but there were other things that were coming, like, Hitler's rise to power, but it was really about the extermination of Jews. I mean,
Well,
and I use the Holocaust because that's a major thing that a lot of people know about.
it,
But
it wasn't
I
just
mean, you could
Jews.
do
It
that about
was
any war.
anyone that wasn't.
Yeah,
It was,
anyone that
it was
wasn't.
Gypsies, Romanians,
Yeah,
Slav,
but I mean,
Russians.
commonly it was. Yeah,
Mostly it was Jews, but it wasn't just Jews. It wasn't 6 million Jews. It was 6 million Jews, Slavs, Russians.
anyone who didn't fit the perfect ideal.
Yeah. With state rights, if the government wanted to take it away, or with slavery, it was also states' rights, because if the federal government's telling, hey, you can have slaves, but each individual state wants to have slaves, then they should have. A confederacy is state. It's a smaller government. It's not federal government, which is probably why the Confederate States lost, because Jefferson Davis could not assemble an army as Lincoln can. My voice is shaky because I'm like, my adrenaline's pumping. I'm sorry. It is. I don't know. I like anyway.
Well, it's fun actually debating someone who doesn't like talk for a minute and then like give up and leave.
No, I mean I'm not gonna do that. I mean I put it down. I believe that, you know.
No, I mean, just like a lot of people, they like state their opinion, and then like after the first minute, when they realize someone actually has something to say, they just leave.
I don't do that. So I guess with slavery it was states' rights, because a confederacy or a confederate is state governments. So like Jefferson Davis can be like, Louisiana, we need some troops, help us please, because that's the federal government in the Confederacy was not that powerful. But Lincoln could be like, hey, Maine, give us 4 of your people, which just happen to be troops, and help. So that was probably a difference. It was I guess this is also subjective, but states' rights, because the Confederacy and whatnot. But so whether it was about slaves or whatnot, not a lot of people had slaves. I'm not saying like 49% of people didn't have slaves. It was like 30%, I think, max. And even that was only, the very rich. And it wasn't, slavery now is portrayed as, very awful and like Django kind of thing. But that, I don't want to say it didn't happen, because I'm sure it happened, but it wasn't common. Like most people that had slaves were also out in the field. It was extra help. It wasn't like massive plantation owners that.
But regardless, people should still have the right to decide their own future, and even if I'm sure if you would have asked the slaves, hey, is this just a little bit of extra help, they would have been like, no, this sucks. Because I mean, yeah, if someone ever came into my home and told me you need to do this for how many hours a day and you're going to get this meal, and basically controlled every, I mean, I don't want to say micro aspect because I don't know how much control was actually put into the lives of slaves, but I assume it was pretty much every aspect of someone's life, I would be pretty unhappy. And if I can't remember exactly how much time has passed since the Civil War.
150.
I want to give, thank you. 100. If 150 years later, some ancestor of mine wanted to fly the flag, I'd be like, why? Why? When that was built on the backs of people. In comparing
Under the
American
flag
to me,
like that.
But comparing the Confederate flag to the American flag to me is like, it's comparing something that's not really the same. It's similar, but it's not really.
So how are they
different?
different?
Because even though the American flag was built on bloodshed, it's not a direct symbol of oppression, and it's not commonly used to show someone's, those people today who believe in oppression still, and let's segregate, let's bring back Jim Crow laws, those people, they use this symbol to show how they feel. And if we know that symbol is being adopted by those people, why do we continue to just you know use that symbol for heritage? It's not.
Well, the American flag was also because it was oppressive. It was to Native Americans and the Chinese with the Chinese Exclusion Act in the 1900s, and how we put Japanese
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
in Japanese in internment camps under FDR, which was 70 years ago, in the 40s, because we think that they might be working for the Japanese government, is very oppressive. So maybe the American flag is more oppressive than the Confederate flag, because the American flag hits on a more variety of people than the Confederate flag does. The Confederate flag does, if you see it as oppressive, just really attacks Black people and the former slaves and whatnot. The American flag, it hits numerous
Well, it's not
tribes.
just Black people, but it's not just Black people. It's colored people. I mean,
yes, but it's still basically,
yeah.
it's not different ethnics and nationalities, as in Chinese and Japanese and Native Americans and Black people and mixed people.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of biased because like I am colored, but and I'm not Black, but I can say that if someone were to fly the Confederate flag, I would personally feel offended, because I mean, I try not to let like my own feelings come into debates, because they're more about like the legal situation. But this entire debate is kind of a little bit based on feelings, because it's the feelings of someone. Someone feels like their rights are going to be infringed, or someone feels like this is really offensive, and I can side with that really offensive side, because when okay, is that your side? Because I got a little scared.
Yeah.
But no, it's okay. But if I were to see that someone was trying to, I'm Hispanic, someone was trying to bring up the Zoot Suit riots, and were trying to basically bring, if that had a major flag and we're flying that flag, I'd be like, why are you doing that? People of my culture lost their lives, and well, they've not lost their lives, I don't know the exact total, but were hurt, and that was a lot of pain that was caused to a lot of people, and not just a lot of people, to a group of people that were gathered together by their skin color or by their blood. And I would be offended, and I would expect our either government or our state to step in and say, in your privacy of your home, you have that right. But when you step outside and you're amongst a group of people, or you're, in a place where other people could be offended, I don't think that's really your right, because it's, I mean, it just gets kind of like, where should the right start and the right end? And I don't think it should end, but in a situation like that, I can say I would be personally really offended, and I would feel so bad for anyone who ever had a family. I mean, I'm sure people aren't alive from the Civil War, or, like, unless they're a vampire 150 years old, but people who have grandfathers that maybe told them stories, or great, 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 whatever, passed down through stories, and I'm sure they feel really offended every time they see that. Or people today who had family members that have died, if you want to say it's focused on Blacks, then people who have had family members that died because of, violence towards Black people. I'm pretty sure they're so offended when they see that, because it makes them think about all the horrific things that they've been going through now, not only for this period of time, but for hundreds of years. So why would you want to bring that up for someone? Because it does affect a large mass of people. And in the end, if that were to happen to people who are flying that flag, anyone can sit here and say it's their right. But if that were to happen to you, you would be upset, and you would want that to not be there. And if that were to happen to someone you care about, you'd be even more upset.
Well,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but there's also the argument of every Native American that's ever lived, basically, because
is upset with the American flag.
Yeah, because it is oppressive. It didn't move them. Jim Crow happened under the American flag. Segregation originally happened under the American flag. Slavery originally happened under the American flag. everything else, you're naming off didn't just happen on the Confederate flag. It was from 1860 to 1865 that affected just 13 states, I think. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I think it was 13. I was trying to think about that. Keep going. Sorry.
So, yes, it was a large group of people, but it wasn't as large of a group of people before 1860.
Mm-hmm.
So, the American flag is oppressive. It does symbolize oppression. It does symbolize, hatred to some group of people, just as in the Confederate flag does. So I guess with that, if a Native American doesn't like the American flag because it's oppressive, but I love the American flag because it represents freedom and whatnot. Two subjective things. Why should we take it down because it hurts someone's feelings? Same thing with the Confederate flag. If it offends somebody, but if I love it, why should it be taken down?
And I agree with that. I mean, I have an American flag flying outside. Like I'm all on board with that. But you also are talking about a flag that symbolizes an entire country and a flag that just symbolizes a group of people. And
Well,
maybe if Native Americans want to make an argument that there needs to be a flag reform, that's a different topic. But with the Confederate flag, it's supporting a group of people who are known to use it, and maybe just extremists, but are known to use it to symbolize oppression and their support for oppression or segregation or whatever form they choose to want to call it.
well,
And so, it's different. One's a country, and maybe that needs to be addressed in the future, and I'll think about that later. But there's a difference because one is just symbolizing this group of people who were for slavery, and no matter what you want to say it stood for, that's what it stands for today. And so what difference does it make what maybe it stood for back then if we know our culture uses this to symbolize something, and not only just one side? It's not like the people who are victims of violence choose to symbolize, it's the people who are doing violence choose to symbolize with that. Then why are you? And if you want to talk about, I forgot his name, the Charleston shooter, you said it earlier and I forgot.
Dylan Roof.
Thank you. And if Dylan was burning the American flag and showing his support for the Confederate flag, doesn't that say something about it too? Because I mean, he burned the American flag, which that's a symbol of our country, but he was so eager to take up a Confederate flag and use it. It's showing that that's what that symbolizes today. That even radicals can say, yeah, that's pretty much what it symbolizes for, and they take it up in arms and use it to symbolize their hate for other
Well,
people. And I'm sure there's a group who are responsible, but you yeah, the few ruin it for the many. But if you're a responsible person who does want to fly it, you should know that the people in your party doing that, they are ruining it for you. And that's something that needs to be addressed within itself. But until it is addressed, it shouldn't be flown.
You said the few ruin it for the many. So General Custard, Little Bighorn. I don't know if you know who Custard. He was in Out of the Museum as a wax figure.
I know Custard is.
Little Bighorn.
He's also in the game Clue.
Yeah,
but
it was he was an American general that went out to some western state and massacred several of thousands of Native American women and children and men, and that wasn't the only time he's done that. That was under the American flag. So, and for the few that did have slaves under the Confederate flag, I don't see a difference. Because, I mean, if you think about it, they're both oppressive. The Confederate flag was oppressive to colored people. The American flag was oppressive to Chinese, Japanese, Native Americans, coloreds, and even because like the times change, it doesn't mean like a Native American's feeling towards that flag doesn't change. Just because Native Americans are such small in populations doesn't mean that their voices shouldn't be heard. If they are still offended by the American flag, then they they should have an equal opportunity. So I think just because there's more distaste for the Confederate flag than there is for an American flag, is why the Confederate flag is such a hot debated topic.
Well, I agree with that. I do think in partial that people took the Confederate flag and they used it. I do say kind of wrongly. I mean, I understand why, but I do feel like people put all the blame and hate that they had for all the times of oppression into a symbol, which is kind of stupid when you think about it because it's just a symbol. But they put all those feelings of animosity towards an entire history of oppression and whatever else you want to call it, but they put all those feelings into one flag. And,
That's kind of the same thing with the
part of
American
me,
flag.
yeah, yeah, I see that. It's just, you know, if, okay, so if we allow people to fly the Confederate flag and then some act of violence happens, then now what? Do you just allow acts of violence to happen against the Confederate flag and say, well, it's their right? Or should you take action to make sure that that possibility of violence isn't even there?
So, how would you say about the former Marine that shot the 5 or 6 police officers in Dallas? I mean, because they're both under the American flag, just very different views of the American flag.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would you explain that? Do you think that we should remove the American flag just as even as a, I guess, an example or a chance for that to happen, or no?
Well, but I feel the American, well, but the Dallas shooter was also, from what I understand, was fueled by other things than just, and put other things on it, not just the American
But he
flag.
was a
From,
former Marine that took an oath to defend the rights and the flag.
but his oath is regardless. That his oath doesn't mean that he disrespected the American flag. His oath just means he lost his duty as a Marine. And there are many more things that go into that besides the American flag. Him shooting someone doesn't have anything to do with the American flag. If he had flown the American flag on his back while he was shooting people, then that's a little different. But I think the statement that when he shot people, he, did it with the American flag, I think that's kind of
Well, who
not
taught
there.
him how to shoot like that?
The Marines,
And the
but
Marines,
but then he's disrespecting the Marines, not
and the
the
Marines fight
American flag
for
itself.
America, so they're
Yeah, but that's a symbol. He's not disrespecting all of America by doing that. I mean, his actions were disrespectful, and it's kind of hard for me to argue because I really hope I'm not offending people. But he's not representing that side. Or else I could say that every crime someone committed who was for Confederacy is therefore a disrespect to the Confederate flag and is therefore a disrespect to every single person who lost their lives to that culture, which is why I don't believe in flying it.
well.
Because every
You're
time
missing the
someone flies
point.
it, it's disrespectful.
The subjectiveness of it. If the person that shot, the Dallas cops was a Marine, so he obviously took pride in that flag, but he took, that pride, however he showed it, was shooting police officers. That was his view of the American flag, was let's kill police officers. The Black Lives Movement, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't mean everyone sees the American flag in that way. It means that he does. The police officers, which have a very different view of the American flag, do not see it as that. They see it as this is something I should protect the rights
Mm-hmm.
of, et cetera, et cetera. Same with the Confederate flag. You could see it as, this is awful, blah, 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 blah. I could see it as, heritage. It's
Yeah.
very subjective. And the fact that, you're worried about offending people, I'm sure to Native Americans that the American flag is offensive. Doesn't mean that we should remove the American flag, you know?
Yeah, I still disagree with it, but I see your point, and you have a lot of evidence to back it up. Yeah, yeah, it's a hard topic to debate from this side because you're going against like rights, and nobody likes the rights infringed. But I do see your point, and it does call for like a little bit of thought on more towards the middle,
Yeah, I mean,
and people not being so.
if you
Oh wait, I think I have to go right now.
okay.
So I'll probably be debating you later on about something else since you're the
All
only
right.
person who's really active on this site.
I'm sorry.
Never mind. Um,
Okay.
but thanks.
You're welcome. Bye.